Keeping It Green is made possible by cooperation with Chippewa Valley Community Television and the UW Extension Office. Welcome to this episode of Keeping It Green. I'm Erin Lefebvre, your host, and today we're at Steve and Ellen Terwilliger's house talking about solar energy. Hi Steve, thank you for joining us today to talk about solar panels and energy.
Hi Erin, it's very nice of you to ask us to be interviewed for this session of Keeping It Green.
So let's just start with, how do you know if solar will work on your own property?
Probably the easiest way is to contact a solar installer, someone in the area, and oftentimes they'll come out and give you a quick look or even a more in-detailed assessment of your site. It's called a site assessment. Even as a homeowner, you can go outside, look south, look east, look west. If you got some shading, which way does your roof face? I mean, you can look at some really basic things like that and answer the questions right away.
What kinds of things will the solar installer be looking for?
They'll be looking for a clear south exposure for solar panels. In this part of the country, a place to tilt them towards the sun direction. That averages about 45 degrees. If you've got trees too close on the south side of the house or too close or too tall on the east and the west, those can be problems. So usually about 1 in 5 people in this area has a good site for solar, residential solar, something like that. Commercial and business properties, many more of those are very good sites for solar.
And how does somebody find a qualified solar installer?
There are about 90 of them in the state of Wisconsin, so they're very easy to find. Go on the web, look for solar installers. WSCIA, WSCIA, I believe is the acronym there, is a professional organization. They list all of those installers. In the area here, we have Next Step Energy in Eau Claire. We've got Chippewa Valley Alternative Energy in Chippewa Valley, in Chippewa Falls, I'm sorry. Carr Creek in Woodville. We've got Legacy Solar up ways to the north here. Those are 4 that I can think of immediately that I know of that have done solar installs in the area very successfully. Very happy customers.
Great. And how easy is it to install my own system if I wanted to, would you say?
You need some experience there. Solar is actually a very simple system, but there are certain things you need to know, like, which panels, which inverters, how do you rack the system. Racking means how do you install it, whether it's on a rooftop or is it a freestanding installation. You need to know, types of caulk, types of bolts. You need to know some architectural language, numbers of things you need to know. You need to be good at working with people, city inspectors, utility inspectors. You need some experience.
So I've
got a great website on that, homemadeenergy.businesscatalyst.com. You can check that out, our whole process here.
Okay, so it's not like you just buy a kit, you put it together, and you mount it to the house. It's a little bit more complex than that.
It's more complex than that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's really a fun project if you enjoy those kinds of things, but you have to, have some experience, construction experience. You have to know materials. You have to know something about electricity and home wiring, those things. You have to know the codes. You have to, meet the requirements for city inspection, all those sorts of things, yeah.
How large of a system is needed to supply a typical house?
That can vary. Right now, 4 kilowatts is probably a pretty typical size system. You can find systems ranging from that kind of 3 to 6 kilowatt range. The ones we have 2 here, actually an earlier and a later installation. Ours are larger than that, but we heat the house with electricity, so we required a larger system to cover all its electric needs.
So you use a system that heats your whole, or provides electricity for your whole house?
Yes, the only energy we use in the house is electricity. We have a geothermal heating system. We replaced our gas forced air with geothermal in 2010, and that's all electric compressors and pumps, so fans, etc.
How difficult is it to install a system?
We just had neighbors who installed a system, and they made the famous statement, "That was easier than getting the car washed." And that's a very good assessment. because I mean, if you're not a sort of an extreme person who kind of wants to do your own, you bring in an installer and they really do the whole thing from beginning to end. They show up, they install the system, and they leave, and it's running.
Nice.
So they know what they're doing.
So how much does it cost for a typical system, and how long maybe take to pay it off?
Right now, I'd like to think of typical costs, what we call an easy to install system and a difficult to install system. And again, we're talking about residential here, not business or commercial. But a residential rooftop, kind of a home system. What you dream of is a south-facing metal roof. And you can put a system on there in less than a day. So it's very quick and easy to do and very low cost, because the installation, the labor is the greatest part of the cost, not the equipment. It's the labor and the time it takes to install a system.
That is interesting.
So easy installations, and I'm going to give you ballpark idea approximation after two financial incentives. One is the focus rebate, and the other is the federal tax incentives. So those take a substantial amount of the cost off of installing the system. But I would say, excuse me, typically an easy install system, once the rebates and incentives have been applied, are about $1,200 to $1,500 per kilowatt, somewhere in that range. What I would call a ground mount or a difficult installation, ours are both difficult installations here. Those are going to run more, somewhere in the $1,800 to $2,200 per kilowatt. And you can multiply that by the 4 for maybe a typical system, and you come up with a cost.
What are, can you give us a ballpark of the rebates? What kind of rebates do they
Yes,
give?
Focus on Energy this year had a rebate of $600 per kilowatt. So if you were paying, say, $2,500 a kilowatt for the full price, then you'd be down to about $1,900. Then the federal tax incentive is another 30% off of that. So again, you can do the math there, multiply.
Well, how long does it take to pay off then?
I think the best way to look at putting in rooftop solar is as an investment, and so what you look at as money that you aren't paying for electricity during the year. But the return on investment, time to simple payback, in financial terms it's more complex than that, but people like that simple payback because it gives you a number real quickly. Anywhere between say 8 to 16 years, somewhere in that range. Sometimes less than that too. Our difficult installs here, we calculate, will probably pay off. We're looking now maybe 12 to 14 years, something like that.
Okay. Are there other ways besides rooftop installs to put solar panels in?
There are other ways to use solar power. If you don't have a good site or a good location for solar, utilities now are putting in large solar arrays, and you can buy panels or buy capacity on those arrays. So that's one way. Basically anybody can access solar power if you want to go that way. There are leasing companies, very large leasing companies that are extremely popular across the United States. You don't see them very much in Wisconsin, but in other states, really widely on the west and east coast, leasing companies will come in. And again, they'll install a solar array on your house. They'll be there and gone in a day or two, and your electric bill just continues as it always did, but you're basically buying the solar from your rooftop.
What is the difference between solar electric and solar thermal systems?
At our conferences, oftentimes people will come in with this question. That's like the first one. They say, does this produce electricity or hot water? Well, the systems that we talk about, we concentrate on solar PV or solar photovoltaic, which produces just electricity. Solar thermal produces solar hot water, which is used in heating domestic hot water or in heating systems. But the solar PV, which is the systems that we're focusing on, produce electricity.
Because my understanding is you can get a system put in that just helps you get solar thermal on your water heater.
Yes.
Alone, and that's less expensive probably, and just a smaller setup.
Yes, there are, pros and cons to the solar thermal. They're relatively inexpensive nowadays, and and if you're interested in that, how long till payback, they pay back pretty quickly. They do require considerably more maintenance. That's probably the downside to it.
Okay.
We went with solar electric here just for simplicity. We just wanted a single type of system, so we use basically our hot water as solar hot water.
How much do you get paid by utility for the electricity you produce?
This is one of those common misunderstandings. We don't get paid anything, and I think too often times you see that quoted in news stories that these people are getting paid for their electricity. No, we don't get paid anything. We never get paid a dime by Xcel. We simply use all of our electricity at home. It's just electricity that we make is electricity we don't buy.
And you make if you make excess electricity, what happens to that?
That just simply goes out on the grid, and other people use it. The power companies are allowed to pay just a tiny, tiny amount of money for that. It's just a token payment. So if you overproduce, you're really helping other people out because you're giving them extremely cheap electricity. I believe the rate right now is 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So usually you design your systems not to overproduce. You design them to be a little bit less than you actually use during a year.
And why is that?
So that you aren't giving electricity away at 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay.
But if you want to do that, you can. But actually, the utilities and their contracts specify that you will not build a system that produces more than you use.
It's kind of a rare instance when you make a little bit more than you thought you would use.
The amounts vary. Of course, in the summer you're making considerably more electricity than you are in December and January, the bad months. And so you have a thing called net metering. And in our zone, we were in Xcel. We settle up at the end of the year, and they look at how much electricity you generated and how much you used. They subtract generated from used, and then you pay them the difference. And so that then simply is purchased from Xcel in our case. And other companies, utilities, do it the same way. Except some do it on a monthly basis, which is a great disincentive and a great disadvantage for solar, because in the summer then, if you do overproduce, they're buying that overproduction at 2.5 cents a kilowatt when it's costing them 20 to 30 cents a kilowatt to produce their own electricity. So it's a great advantage to them.
What happens to the system when it's worn out after 25 years, let's say?
So now we got to another major misunderstanding, one of those common questions that people ask, and you see published all the time. The systems are not worn out in 25 years. They're warrantied for 25 years. And in 25 years, a system is worth at least 80% of what you paid for it in the beginning. And for those 25 years, it's been paying you, say, a 4 kilowatt system, maybe $750 a year. So at 25 years, you maybe have another 25 to 50, 75 years left in the system in its life.
So you say it pays you back that much, but you're essentially saying that the electricity, you're not paying out an electricity bill.
Correct.
It's basically zero. So it's a savings.
Right.
In a way.
I think the way to look at putting on rooftop solar is an investment. I mean, there is an upfront cost, but if you had that money in the bank, and you're getting, 0.5%, and your rooftop solar is probably paying you somewhere between 6 to 10%, or maybe even more, depending on how easy that installation was. And it's just a good place to put your money for an investment. I mean, that's basically what we've done. We have retirement savings, and it's on the rooftop and on those poles out there in front of the house now. Some of it, quite a bit of it.
So how does the weather affect them, say snow or hail or high winds?
I talked with some of the installers locally, and I asked them how many broken panels they've seen from hail. And I think one of them said, I think I saw one cracked once. They're extremely well engineered, they're extremely durable. Hail damage is very rare. In the winter, this is of course snow country. Snow can pile up on them. There's a tendency for the panels to heat up and melt the snow off fairly quickly. Some diehards will go out there with a snow rake and, like me, scrape the snow off. Be sure you've got one with the little nylon rollers on the bottom. If you do that, don't scratch them. But yeah, you can clear the snow off or you can wait for it to melt. But I think one of the hidden benefits of Wisconsin is when the snow is on the ground, you get incredible light reflection off the ground and the solar production goes way up.
Interesting.
Yeah, the best months here for solar production for our systems have been basically February and March. Yeah, awesome.
Wow.
Especially March. March is the month to beat.
That is, I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
It seems backwards.
Yeah, January starts to turn around. December and January are terrible. This year were the worst December and Januaries I've ever seen. I mean, they were just awful. But at the end of January, suddenly turned around, and February was awesome, and March was unbelievable.
You just have to have good sun, I'm assuming, to bounce off of the snow.
Yeah,
like
the
you're
snow
saying.
Reflection really increases the intensity of the light, and you just make more electricity.
Wow.
We have some shading on the east side, and tree shading too, and when the leaves come out in the trees in April and May, we can see the production go down.
Well, are there any local events or places people can go to learn more about solar energy, solar thermal?
Yes, CVTC is going to be sponsoring a Solar Power Wisconsin conference this fall on October 24th. We had a conference last year which was incredibly successful. We had around 200 people at that conference. CVTC, Chippewa Valley Technical College, has just put in a new energy center on the west side in West Camp. It's open to the public, it's free of charge. Show up, find out about solar. We have local installers from all around the state. We have speaking there for Excel and Eau Claire Energy Co-op. So we're really excited about the conference. Yeah, come on out, talk to people who have solar installations, installers who've installed systems locally. We'll have some of the people they've worked for there, and they'll tell you whether it worked or not and how happy they are. They're all pretty happy, I can tell you right now.
And you can meet the installers, it sounds like?
You can meet the installers. Yeah. If you bring your electric bills, they'll pull up a Google Earth image of your residence and give you a pretty good idea whether a solar install would work on your home, you know. I mean, all kinds of things. It's just really a lot of fun. We'll have refreshments too, like last year.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a great resource for people who are just thinking of it or want to improve their system they already have or anything like that.
Yes, for information, to contact people. It's just a great opportunity.
Well, I think we should go outside now and look at your home system and talk about that.
Let's check it out. We're looking here at our second solar installation. This is a ground mount system. The ground mount was probably about 95% of the work of putting the solar system up. I did this all myself. For those of the people who wonder about doing your own solar systems, you can. It was a heck of a lot of work. So that's where the labor in this one is this what we call a canoe rack down here underneath the solar panels. This system is a 10K solar system, very excellent warranty, and it outperforms the other system probably by about 15 to 20%. It's a super efficient, super high quality, technologically very advanced. It resists shading because each solar cell in the system is its own production unit. So if you have shading on any part of the system or panels, only those parts that are shaded drop down in production. All of the rest stays at 100%. So it's a different way of putting something together. It's an innovative USA technology right from the Midwest here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've got the dahlias growing underneath it. I had to trim the asparagus back a little bit because it grew up so high this year that it was actually starting to shade the bottoms of the panels. One of the goals with a trellis that holds the solar panels was to make it somewhat integrated as part of the garden too, and that was extra work. Next to the 10K installation, we have what I'll call our original installation. This one is an excellent example of what I would call a super easy install, very little labor in this installation. My cousin and I put that up there in less than a day, complete. And neither one of us had done that before. We just simply said, oh, this looks like it should go this way, and away we went. So an easy install, labor costs very low on that. So that's what you'd call classic south-facing metal roof, 45-degree angle. The 4 panels up here are part of the second installation. It's another trellis. This one we're particularly concerned with incorporating this in with the gardening, so we tore up the concrete approach to the garage here, put in gardening all down through here and the trellis, and we're getting some climbing plants going up that. But again, part of the 10K installation, the second installation. And then back over here again, you can see another angle on the easy install. Once the trellises were up, these panels were put on in 2 partial days of work, from nothing on there to the panels on and the thing functioning. If we look over here, you'll see one of the more difficult installations. This is the side of a building install. And we worked on this for some time, and a lot of the time that goes into a solar installation can be in the planning. And this first installation, and this is 6 of the 26 panels in that first installation, we had to figure out just how to engineer that, to get them to fit in there, to have them at a 45-degree angle, how to be supported architecturally, engineered correctly on the side of a building. So that did take a bit of work, and all of that's extra time. So that ran the expense of that system up higher than it would have been if we'd simply had only that to do. And then further back, you can see 12 more panels, which are also side of the building, or side of the house, in this case, installation. And those, again, I would classify as very difficult installation, because we had to build scaffolding to get up on the side of the house there. We had to engineer the support system, the racking system correctly to get that done. I did some interior bracing in the house on that side wall to help support the panels. So, south-facing roof. Metal is wonderful. This particular system, we actually put the L-feet on for the racking. We actually went through the metal, and that has to be caulked with a proper type of caulking. But if you have a standing seam metal, you can get what's called an S5 fastener, and then there's no roof penetrations, no holes in the roof at all. It just simply goes right on the top of the roof, and the wiring goes in either through the vent cap at the ridge, or it comes down under the eaves and goes into the house that way. Electronics itself, very simple. These systems all go into the garden shed, and the inverter for the first system, one over here, there, and back on the other side of the house. And it's all DC current to the inverter, and the inverter changes it from DC, direct current, to AC, alternating current, and matches it to the grid electricity. So an inverter is a necessary part. On the second system we put in, the 10K solar system here, the inverter is actually in the back of that panel. So it's outside. They're called micro-inverters, and each pair of panels has its own inverter. Again, technologically very advanced. It's all made in Minnesota, engineered, designed, and manufactured in Minnesota. Probably as advanced a system as exists in the world for solar. It's one of the reasons we did it. You know, we really like to look at local, nearby things in terms of the design, quality, installation, and all very affordable.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keeping It Green. We learned a lot about solar panels, solar energy, and installation. Join us again on Keeping It Green.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.